Hey there, welcome into this 1-hour edition of Golf Today. I'm George Savarikas with Eamon Lynch. But before we turn our focus to this week's event, we got to kick off with the big meeting that happened in the Bahamas. It wasn't exactly a fishing trip. They did play a little golf, though, with the Public Investment Fund Chief Governor Yasir Al-Rumayyan going down to meet with PGA Tour Commissioner Jay Monahan and the player directors. Big picture for the game of golf. Is this a positive or a negative?
I suppose it depends what angle you come from it. For fans who consider it a moral issue with the Saudis, it's never going to be seen as a positive. For players and people within the game who see this strictly in commercial terms, they're probably leaning towards the positive on that. But so much depends on what the terms of any future discussions are going to be on, and I think we're still a long way from that. I'm actually just amazed more information hasn't come out about it yet, because you know what PGA Tour players are like. They're about as tight-lipped as town criers, George. But eventually it's going to come out as some sense of what the meeting was, not necessarily the particulars of the discussion, but at least a sense of how the players reacted to the PIF representatives in the room and what they think the issues might be going forward. They're going to have a better idea of what the goals are on the other side and whether that's reconcilable with what the intent is on the PGA Tour players' side.
We're going to dig into this a lot more during this hour-long edition of Golf Today. Let's get you to the details of what exactly transpired. It was members of the PGA Tour Enterprises Board, including player director Tiger Woods. They were on hand in Bahamas on Monday for what was, for many of them, the first in-person meeting with PIF Chief Governor Yasir Al-Rumayyan. By Monday evening, Monahan had updated PGA Tour members via memo saying that he and the 6 player directors, which is Woods, Patrick Cantlay, Webb Simpson, Adam Scott, Jordan Spieth, and Peter Malnati, did indeed visit with Al-Rumayyan on Monday. The memo continued to say the conversation throughout was constructive and represents an important part of our due diligence process in selecting potential investors for PGA Tour Enterprises. This mirrors the approach we employed earlier this year as we evaluated an investment offer from the Strategic Sports Group. During the session, Yasir had a chance to introduce himself to our player directors and talk through his vision, priorities, and motivations for investing in professional golf. As we continue these discussions with the PIF, we will keep you updated as much as possible, but please understand that we need to maintain our position of not conducting negotiations in public. To that end, we will provide no further comment to the media at this time. Kira K. Dixon, who was on site this week at Innisbrook Resort for the Valspar Championship. Kira, you had a chance to catch up with the players. What are the general sentiments about Monday's meeting in the Bahamas?
Well, George, there are several player directors in the field this week at the Valspar Championship that were able to make the trip to the Bahamas and then up here to the Tampa, Florida area. I was able to speak with one of the player directors that was in the meeting, and he said that, first of all, it was nice to just demystify who Yasir Al-Rumayyan is, the chief governor of the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia. And, you know, this has been a figure that they've mostly just seen pictures and videos of. So to get into the actual room, put a face to the name, humanize everything was very much important for them. He also said that, you know, Yasir came into this meeting with his ideas of where professional golf should go, and of course the PGA Tour side and the players have their ideas of where professional golf should go. And he said that, you know, they're pretty far away from actually coming to a place where they're going to make steps to unification together, but that it was very much a positive meeting and that the relationship is, quote, very open from here on out. I was also able to catch up with a few players that were not in the meeting to see what their reaction was to the news of the meeting taking place.
Yeah, I wasn't too privy of everything that was going on. This morning I read some articles about how they met, and yeah, I mean, I think they're moving along is what it sounds like, and you know, I'm glad all the guys were able to make it. I know some guys were playing this week that had to go down to Bahamas, but you know, I think it's in negotiations, it's good for all our directors or play directors at least to show up in good faith for some sort of agreement. So I'm sure they're going to try and iron something out. I have no clue as to what it would look like, but talks are ongoing.
Yeah, I know you mentioned that you're not privy to the discussion firsthand, but what would be your hope of what comes from this initial meeting?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure some sort of unification. I'm sure that's sort of the biggest topic of bringing the game back together. So I have no idea how that would look like. especially just with, you think big picture. You have a lot of rookies coming up on tour here, making names and stories for themselves, and then you got to bring in some of the familiar faces that we've seen for many years. So I haven't really put a whole lot of thought honestly into that on how that would look, but with Fenway and our directors and our team here, I'm sure they can put their minds together and get something done.
I thought it was about time, as a PAC member and was on the ballot for PAC chair. One of the first things I said was, I think we need to talk to Yasir here and see what his intentions are, what are his visions with professional golf. Clearly he's got the financial backing to make serious moves, and they have. And my concern is for the integrity of the PGA Tour, the future of the PGA Tour, and it's something that's been my dream for 40 years, since I was 5 years old, to be out here and to compete against the best, to play the historic venues, and to win trophies that have real meaning to them. So as long as we keep that integrity as priority number one, we'll see what happens.
I have not spoken with anyone yet, but I think it was good. Listen, I've said what I've thought of the guys that have gone over and the way they left and I would say somewhat trashed the PGA Tour, and that was my main issue, my biggest issue. I think you can go back and look at all my comments over the last couple of years. I've never had any issues with PIF or Saudis. So I've always felt that I thought a deal would come. I thought it would be, maybe 5 years from the start. We're 2.5 years from that now, or 2 years in. I thought it would be a little bit further down the road, but I think looking at the game of golf, and as a golf fan, in which I love the game of golf and I love watching it, I think I'm like golf fans. I'm tired of all this bickering back and forth. Somehow we got to figure out how to get rid of that, whether we have a truce and they do their thing, we do our thing, or whether we come together as one entity. So I think you've seen what the Saudis do in other sports, and I think, listen, they're going to be a power throughout this world for many years to come, for decades to come, because of the money that they have. So I think if there was a deal that was in favor, or our player directors were in favor of, and Jay and the board were in favor of, I think that'd be really good. But we have to see how it plays out. But I think it's a good first step to at least have our player directors talk to Yasir, see what they want, see what his intentions is, and then they can figure something out. And then having with SSG, a part of the PGA Tour, Arthur Blank, John Henry, two great people, many other people involved in that group, they're going to make sure that the PGA Tour is protected as well.
So, guys, of course, plenty of strong opinions in the room in the Bahamas, but also still plenty of strong opinions just here out on the range on the PGA Tour. When you start talking about things like signature events, what are we doing about cuts? What are we doing about limited fields, guaranteed money? Are the live players going to come back to the PGA Tour? Those are the questions that a lot of folks out here are asking and want answers to. And it almost seems like there's a bit of fatigue and perhaps some resignation when it comes to answering all those questions and waiting for what happens next. So perhaps this meeting in the Bahamas is rounding the corner towards getting some of those answers.
All righty, Kira, at least a kickoff point for a lot of these people involved to have a face-to-face conversation. And let's continue the convo with Golf Channel senior writer Rex Hoggard. Rex, now that they had this introductory meeting for a lot of the stakeholders, what's next?
I think the next step is obviously going to be you get further down the line in the negotiations. And I like the way Eamon started this conversation. And you talk about it strictly in commercial terms, and that's kind of where we are right now. It seems to me they can come up with a deal that would include PIF in PGA Tour Enterprises because the market has already been set. The deal with SSG, it gave the PGA Tour Enterprises a valuation. It gave everyone an idea of what a minority investment would look like. In the case of SSG, that was $1.5 billion in initial investment. Those are pretty easy to start with. You can sit down and start having conversations. I think what happened yesterday was the next logical step. As Kira just pointed out, this isn't just about the numbers. This isn't a normal merger that you would have between companies trying to come up with some sort of multi-billion-dollar deal. You have hurt feelings. You have players on both sides that have strong feelings on this. How do those players who join Live Golf, how are they welcomed back to the PGA Tour? How does Team Golf fit into all of this? I think yesterday is a really, really good first step in that conversation, and it probably gives the player directors a better idea where PIF and Yasir are coming from.
Is it fair to say, Rex, at this stage that one of the many unknowns in all of this is the internal tour politics? Because on one side you've got the PGA Tour guys versus the LIV guys. That's the obvious one. But you have PGA Tour players, the elite players, kind of against the rank and file at the moment as well. You have what seems some weeks all of the members against the executive side of the PGA Tour as well. There seems to be a lot of bruised feelings, a lot of bruised egos that are still very much in play in this conversation.
I think PGA Tour Commissioner Jay Monahan is going to come up with a T-shirt that says not going to negotiate in public based on how many times he has said it over the last few weeks. And I certainly understand where he's coming from. It's a very, very difficult process, and you're not going to be able to do that if you're constantly battling headlines. However, to your point, it's a member organization with 250 plus members. They all have opinions, they all have ideas, and you're right, the internal politics are going to come into play in this. You're not going to be able to negotiate in public, but you're also not going to be able to negotiate this in a vacuum, because everyone is ultimately going to want their voices heard. And as we've seen, as we continue to see, those voices keep getting louder and louder as we seem to get closer to some sort of deal with the PIF. I was texting back and forth with a player this morning, and his first comment was, a deal is good for all. And I think that's where a lot of players are starting to land. But this player was also quick to point out that 4 of the top 10 players on Sunday at the Players' Championship went head-to-head at the Tour's flagship event on a really, really difficult golf course all the way down to the 72nd hole. That's a really good product. And this player's take was, yeah, I'd like to see a deal, but the PGA Tour product is still strong with or without those players who join LIV Golf.
But Rex, the player says that the ratings for the players were down by a sizable amount. Every event since the American Express, the ratings have been down so far this season. So while players tout what was the theater of the 50th edition of the Players, which we agree was a great watch, the market reaction to it has been some general malaise compared to where ratings were a year ago.
It is a problem, and I think that's probably the bigger problem going forward for the PGA Tour. Wherever it is they land with PIF and PGA Tour Enterprises and whatever the product is going to look like, I think the bigger issue is going to be bringing those fans back who have clearly become disenfranchised with the idea that players are just chasing money, and that we end up with a situation where the game is fractured and we have people asking us as journalists, which one should I watch? Which product on a Sunday afternoon is the better product? I don't think anybody appreciates that, at least not from the fan perspective. We pointed this out time and time again. A fractured game's not good for most of the players involved. It's not good for the media partners, but most importantly, it's not good for the fans. And I think that's the backlash, and that'll be the challenge that the PGA Tour is going to have to overcome.
Yeah, certainly the case. He is Rex Hoggard. Eamon, we've been kicking around just amongst ourselves. Say that this is a step toward some type of unification, reconciliation, however you want to phrase it. At what point could golf fans forecast in the future that we could have some equilibrium where whatever the new normal is, that's where we're at?
Not anytime soon, because it's a long road to get there. And I traded messages last night with someone who was intimately familiar with what was going on in the Bahamas yesterday, and the response I got was partly sunny with scattered but significant clouds, which would suggest that the player directors and the PGA Tour people in the room thought there's something to potentially work with, but there are immense hurdles between now and then. And that's before you even get into the idea of a deal being reached over these thorny issues. And Rex highlighted some of those thorny issues there, and you can't really underestimate them. I mean, you're going to talk about the fate of LIV players. Do they have to earn their status back? Are they back by right? That's a huge issue in the locker room on the PGA Tour. You talked about the robustness of the PGA Tour product right now. That's an issue with all of the Tour's media partners. There are tournaments and sponsors that are feeling squeezed as well. There are an immense number of issues that they have to work through that aren't really core to any kind of financial terms with the Saudis at all. If you figure that, as Jay Monahan told the board recently, that it would be end of year as a target for a deal with PIF, you're probably looking at a year by their own estimate of DOJ scrutiny of that. So by the time you actually see in practical terms what that deal looks like, optimistically, you're looking at Q4 of 26, more likely, I would suggest, into the 27 season. Now, what kind of détente is reached between now and then is another matter. But in terms of what the longer-term future of this game looks like, that's still probably a couple of years away.
More concerned by just the current status of the negotiation, where it seems almost advantageous for PIF to extend this horizon, given what the PGA Tour is facing in this kind of short-term run to kick off the season, or the internal seemingly strife between the rank and file on the PGA Tour with the top 20 players, and just how disjointed the messaging has been so far.
Yeah, there's no sense of urgency on either side right now, but you can tell from some of that player reaction, there's no great urgency on the PGA Tour player side either. They don't want to do a deal so badly that they do a bad deal. And that's what a lot of them think happened on June 6th. And I don't think they're in any rush to do that right now. So it's going to play out, it's going to take time, but no one's in a particular hurry to do anything right now.